put your hands up. Black girl, gone, put your hands up. If you got your hands up, I bet you understand, but we're not the ones on camera. Those souls are trapped there. If you had got your hands up, I bet you understand, but we're not the ones on camera. Those souls are trapped there. Keep a cool head, Mr. Officer. Keep a cool head, Your Honor, sir. Keep a cool head, Mrs. Officer. Keep a cool head. Niggas who are not the one. I got many niggas who ain't make it from 92. Night and day I heard the slang playing all on the news. As I wonder if I'm next, your children laugh, call us all the coons. I'm a gamer, yeah, they say the same things when I'm line with you. Flow proper, showstopper, bounce with me, hope thotta. Ladies so proper, I collect bounties on the mic. Rappers write they rhymes and I'm listening like, no, nada. Authenticity lives with me, I get busy, B. 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 Dame the type you catch up in his lane, playing his own game, never stressing lames, had his share of shame, came into the game without a chain. That means something, nigga, I'm onto something. I got people jumping off for nothing, came from nothing. When you clubbing women, see you in a different light. I'm in the gym running on these rappers like I stole something. Baby in the kitchen just for me and cook a little something, yeah. If real recognize real, when it's fake unfamiliar. If fake is unfamiliar, how can we get any realer? Authenticity lives with me, I get busy, B. 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 Yeah.
You are now tuned in to DameSmiff.
Yeah. Loser, that is my name. Shooter, this is no game. Who's this? Oh, this is Dame. Come to move ya and change the game. Booyaka, killed me some lames. They tried to take our culture, so stay in your lane. I do this just to stay sane. You're not the king, so peep by I reign. I make it do what it do just like a vulture. Every time I rhyme, I up and invent a new culture. Black music is over at your door like a Jehovah. Cracking heads open just to reinvent all the old stuff. But you know what? I'm colder and colder and colder and colder. I thought I had told y'all, but now I will show y'all. Yeah, for this verse here is over. Break the beat down. Oh yeah, well I'm a loner, so know us. So do just what you wanna do. This movie here is starring you. Never settle for number 2, cause there won't be no other you. Think that there is another you. Tell me who is the other you? Now you sitting here sounding just like the mother fool.
Shake that shawty, shake that shawty, up and down, it's your party.
Yeah, I bet you like that. But tell you what, baby girl, you ain't getting that time back.
When I see you out up in these streets, I know you doing sweet, no trick but no treat. I love the way your beats, baby, move my beat, and the message that you speak is just what I need. Now when I tune in, I get the moving, we get the moving, the world is moving, such a pleasure, baby. Can you do me one thing? Can you just make love to my ears once again?
Yeah, well who you think you bumping to? Some kid with some other dude, skimming some pyramid, I slid past them other dudes. Such an impeccable mage, I'm ineffable. Y'all just learning about the biz, I've been setting stone.
Shake that shawty,
Yeah.
shake that shawty,
Yeah.
up and down,
Yeah.
it's your party.
Yeah, I had to let you know them kicks couldn't let them go. Gave you some ignorance, cause I know that's all you know. So when you do this, they bound to ask you who this. Let them know you down with Dame, straight coolin'. Better with your freshest gear coming out to do this, cause when I press play, they coming out straight fooling right.
Shake that shawty, shake that shawty, up and down, it's your party.
I bet you like that. But tell you what, baby girl, you ain't getting the time back. You know the only luxury we got is time, and it only moves forward. So don't worry about the past, and don't worry about the future. Just worry about now. So come on, do you? Come on, do you? Now do you? Go, 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 go. Now do you? Sands time. Now do you?
What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff. We are out here with another episode of Musician Talks with DameSmiff. And so it's Friday, y'all, and we're gonna actually pretty much end the week with the traditional and conventional understanding of the music business and continuing our double-edged sword theme for the week. We're actually going to continue on with that conversation as well. So make sure you hit the like button and make sure you guys also are hitting the subscribe button so you can catch my latest videos and things like that. We plan on updating and uploading a lot of content. Make sure you're on the lookout and you're prepared. So today is going to be about the music business in general, right? And the concept is, like I said, the double-edged sword, right? The good side and the bad side, or the bright, the dark side. And the key thing that we have to really understand here is that this is something that most people don't know. It's not, easy information as far as grasping and applying and things like that. It's easy to access, but it's not easy to apply, right? You have to be a certain type of individual to deal with the music industry, and you also have to be a certain type of person to deal with the audience and consumers of the music industry, right? And so a lot of times when we have these conversations, I have questions for artists and things like that, but it's really questions that provoke thought, or it's a sense of like clarity, right? Having you walk through the process that you're doing in real time verbally allows you to solidify the success of it, or at least the result of it, right? Now, some people don't believe in that, but it's essentially the same way a commander or a leader would, I guess you can say, regurgitate the orders, or need the orders that they said regurgitated, right? And it's to understand what you're doing, the clarity, what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, why it's going to happen, right? And so what I've noticed is when I have conversations with even regular people, doing that, it frustrates them because of the effort, but it also frustrates them because of the vulnerability that comes with it. Now your thoughts have to come out into the real world, and you have to speak upon them and then make them concrete and communicate it with another mind. And for some reason, people shut down when they do that. Now, I guess, it's that introvert extrovert thing or whatever you guys talk about. But essentially what it is like, I can ask you, what are you doing? Where are you going? And if you start giving me like little bits and pieces of information, that tells me that there's something missing as far as either your understanding of what you're doing, the purpose of what you're doing, or whether or not the person you're communicating with is on a need to know basis, which then it kind of, puts a title and a box on the relationship that you have, right? So I'll give you an example. If Finesse 2 Times asked his record label, hey guys, can we look at the contract together? I just met with my lawyer and he said we can do that. And his record label says, nah, we don't need lawyers to do that, but we can still meet. What do you guys think is going on with that relationship, right? If you have a tour that you're managing, right? And you notice 2 of your roadies while you guys are out at the restaurant parked, and in the parking lot, getting ready to leave, you notice two of your roadies are just walking away together just down the street, right? And you ask them, where are you going? And they say, to the store. What does that tell you about the relationship, right? So there's a lot of things that are needed as far as like clarity and understanding that many people shy away from and resist, but it's a thing that helps you in this business because you're going to be able to actually and clearly be able to explain what it is you're thinking, and you can also process your thoughts instead of just relying on how you feel in the moment, right? So in those two examples, Finesse Two Times record label could, feel like they trust him or feel like he trusts them, right? But the issue is that the reason you would have a lawyer in that conversation is to bring clarity. So the idea of them rejecting that should signal, at least to the artist in that moment, what kind of relationship you may have, right? And then in the instance where you're a tour manager and your two roadies are just walking away from, let's say, the restaurant you guys are at, just walking down the street to the store, the fact that there's vagary in where they're going and why they're going there compared to what a tour manager needs to think about, it kind of shows you what the relationship is between the two, right? And that's why I use need to know basis, because there's this, I don't know what it is, this like entitlement to like privacy and things like that people feel like can be weaponized in business. And so oftentimes we try to use it in a way like, oh, I should be able to do what I want when I want. But when you have that mindset and you want to cooperate with others, it becomes resentment when the others are trying to bring clarity to what it is that the leadership is trying to do. Okay. So I say it that way to help you guys understand why we're bringing this up, but I also say it that way so that way you may understand where your position may be in your relationships when you may exhibit some of these behaviors, right? You may be the person that is being asked these questions, and then you may not try to answer them fully and completely and thoroughly because of whatever feelings or reasons you may come up with, right? But the results will still be the same. The results will still be that the clarity is missing, and the results of you communicating your clarity has now been hindered based on whatever reason you choose, right? So that's going to be the, I guess you can say, foundational structure of today's episode, because what we're going to look at is how the music business has a lot of layers and, learning curves and things like that we have to manage. But how are you going to be able to get over it if you have this kind of like hindering, almost resistant type of mentality to learning, to trying, sacrifice, and honestly being vulnerable, right? And so this can be helpful for musicians. It can be helpful for people who are not musicians. This can be helpful for people who are like trying to collaborate and cooperate with others. So if you're a person that thinks you're just going to do everything alone, or you're a person that thinks like you're right all the time or something like that, this conversation is not going to hit well. Like you're going to struggle with this a little bit. But if you're a person that's open to being submissive and open to actually learning and then growing through self-improvement, this may help a lot. So let's get into our first clip.
Known by a strange, unpronounceable symbol. No one knew how to say it. Radio DJs didn't know what to call him. Newspapers couldn't even print it properly. Within hours, the biggest pop star of the era had become something entirely different. The artist formerly known as Prince. At first, many people thought it was a publicity stunt. Others believed Prince had simply lost his mind. Late-night comedians mocked the symbol. Industry executives rolled their eyes. But what almost nobody realized at the time was that this bizarre move was actually part of one of the boldest rebellions in music history. Behind the scenes, Prince was locked in a quiet war with his own record label, Warner Brothers Records, a battle over control, creativity, and ownership that had been building for years. And the symbol wasn't just a rebrand. It was a weapon, because what Prince was really trying to do that night was escape his own contract.
And so when you think about all the things that somebody like Prince has created, right, and the effort that they put into their music career, can you imagine how much information you have to understand back then, be Prince, and then compare it to what you have to understand today, right? So when I use the example of like someone saying, I'm just going to the store, instead of being like completely clear on what they're saying, This would be the equivalent of doing that. Prince basically had immense talent and probably a really good network that allowed him to thrive and grow. But when that network becomes something like a, I guess you can say, burden instead of an asset, then you have to be the one to ask, well, what are we doing? What is going to happen? And when is it going to happen? And what he started to realize is that the people talking to him just kept saying, well, we're just going to the store, chill out. And so because that frustrated him and he didn't have any more information, meaning like, where's the control to my music? Where is the control to my estate? What is going to happen with my name? Can I do this with my name? Because these questions were not being answered willfully and submissively by his record label and those who were working with him and around him. He felt cornered, right? And we talked about throughout this week how you can go into survival mode and how intense it is to perform at a high level and how draining it is to get off stage and to have that vacuum of positivity and dopamine sucked out of you, only to then walk into this conversation, right? So when we speak about investing in the artists, this is the part of self-improvement I'm talking about. Like, you're going to have to really understand this entire process, because this can happen in a micro version of, remember the little girl who was playing guitar on TikTok and her music got taken by an AI artist? That's a micro version of what Prince is dealing with, right? But it's happening more and more and more and more and more often because we don't understand this process, right? And also with understanding this process, if you ask the questions that Prince is asking, you guys aren't really prepared for being met with rejection just for asking these questions, right? So like when Finesse 2 Times was told you don't need a lawyer, he was not prepared to handle that. He then went on to sign the contract. When there's so many different situations, like when the T.I. Sync deal that we talked about, when they started to look at the contract and saw the stipulations, for some reason Sync read the stipulations, still went ahead and stole the music, right? And so it works on both ends of the spectrum, but at the end of the day, this level of clarity usually is frustrating for people to commit to because they have ulterior feelings going on with what's happening, right? So in Prince's situation, he's looking for clarity. He's the one asking, hey, like as a tour manager, where are you going? And then the roadies, which would be his record label, are turning around saying, we're just going to the store, nothing's happening, right? And so now he has to figure out, well, what, why, and when is going to happen, and I'm responsible. I'm completely responsible for everything here, and I don't know anything, and you guys aren't telling me anything. So then eventually when he found out, he was able to make a decision, like a true, honest decision, right? And so that part is the part that we notice, and that's the part that where we see the retaliatory effects of everything, and we try to, put him in this kind of like rebellious position. But in reality, the hurdles that an artist is going through, even at the time that Prince was out, should not have existed if we understand the value of what a Prince brings to a business, right? This would be the equivalent of, well, we see it sometimes, but this would be the equivalent of teachers having complaints and needing clarity in schools, and then the schools are telling them, no, it's fine, you'll be okay. Just stop asking questions, right? And so eventually you're going to reach a point to where the teachers are going to find out what's either going on and get clarity to make a proper decision, or they won't. And then they'll just phase out like we've seen many other artists do.
That had been building for years. And the symbol wasn't just a rebrand. It was a weapon. Because what Prince was really trying to do that night was escape his own contract. And once you understand the deal that trapped him in the first place, the entire story becomes even more shocking. Long before the symbol, before the protests, and long before the music industry realized what Prince was planning, everything started with a deal that seemed like a dream. In 1977, an 18-year-old musician from Minneapolis, Minnesota, named Prince Rogers Nelson walked into the offices of Warner Brothers Records. At the time, he wasn't famous. He wasn't even well known outside the local Minneapolis music scene. But inside those offices, something unusual happened. Executives quickly realized they weren't dealing with a typical young artist. Prince could write songs, play nearly every instrument, produce his own music, and arrange entire records himself. For a teenager in the late 1970s, that was almost unheard of.
Okay, so today for a teenager to do that, that's like commonplace. Like your kid should be able to do that, right? But the reason this is hard for the 1970s is what we talked about 2 weeks ago, where we were explaining the difficulty of pulling off a live performance, right? Pulling off getting an album recorded. So back then they didn't have digital audio workstations and stuff like that. And they didn't have MIDI and stuff like that. So he had to learn, go get lessons, if not spend the time practicing each instrument to get proficient enough to sound decent on a record, right? Or at least to his standard, right? And then at that point, he have to pay for studio time with hardware, not software. They had hardware back then, like concrete analog knobs and stuff like that, and tape and things like that to help record. And so what he had to do was consistently pull that off, manage project, time management and all that stuff like that, and then be able to get these other instrumentalists, studios, and all that stuff to mix and master his music. So there was a huge dedication in the process, right? Now, where he learned all that stuff, who knows? But the key thing is that he was the only one probably within his area that were pulling it off at this level, right? I'm sure there was other people trying to make a little song, a single, and stuff like that, but there's one thing one of my mentors told me is that you are always going to be better than somebody if you're faster and more consistent. So he had a little bit of both.
Warner Brothers took a gamble. They signed Prince to a recording contract that gave him something incredibly rare for a young artist: creative control over his music. The label believed they had discovered a once-in-a-generation talent, and they were right. Over the next decade, Prince exploded into one of the biggest stars in the world. Albums like 1999 turned him into a pop phenomenon. Then came Purple Rain in 1984, which didn't just dominate the charts. It became a cultural event. The album sold over 25 million copies worldwide, while the film and soundtrack made Prince a global icon. By the late 1980s, records like Sign O' the Times proved he wasn't just a pop star. He was a musical genius pushing boundaries across funk, rock, and R&B. But hidden inside that original Warner Brothers deal was something Prince would later realize had a massive cost.
Okay, do y'all remember how we looked at DMX and he was saying how they could write 10 complete songs 2 weeks? So even as this narrator is saying it, I'm hearing what he's saying a little bit differently than you might. Like, the idea that somebody can work this hard is super valuable to somebody who's looking for employees. The idea of somebody that works this hard is super valuable to somebody who's looking for a partnership, right? And so we're trying to figure out the bright side and the dark side between committing to a deal or committing to a relationship like this, right? And so when I'm talking about bringing clarity, do you think they told Prince up front, integral, how they were managing his music, how they were managing his career? Because the idea that we're, looking at a predatory record label and stuff like that is one thing, right? We saw Jermaine Dupri talk about how he just walked up to some kids and then came out with Crisscross, right? But the understanding of the business deal has to be clear for Prince as the artist here, who's going to work super hard and is actually looking for resources from them to make a proper decision, right? So we have to figure out, did he know going into this, making the decisions that he did, what was going to happen? Because this is the part that I'm trying to highlight here, is that kind of like, oh, we're going to the store attitude that people would have. They feel as though that answer should be suffice. And so because they think that answer works, they also think you have clarity. And you see how there's a disconnect there. So then if you ask more questions and ask, or I guess, complete and detailed questions about something that they are not trying to tell you, because that's the key thing here. If they know that you don't have clarity, they would offer more information. They would want you to understand, but because they're not trying to focus and prioritize your understanding, they're actually prioritizing ending the conversation or actually avoiding giving you clarity. One of the two, right? And so once we realize that, then we can make a proper decision. And like I keep saying, I want you guys to be able to learn for yourself, see a problem and know what to do with it instead of seeing a problem and hoping somebody else does something. If you were in a situation like Prince, 17, 18 years old, and you're dealing with music moguls, like they're successful music moguls, and you have no clarity on the end or expectations of your career, what would you do? Would you ask more questions? or would you trust them by faith to do the right thing on your behalf?
Because while he controlled the music he created, Warner Brothers owned it. And years later, that detail would turn a dream partnership into a battle that would shake the entire music industry. The $100 Million Trap, 1992. By the early 1990s, Prince wasn't just a superstar. He was one of the most valuable artists in the entire music industry. His albums had sold tens of millions of copies. His concerts filled arenas around the world.
And when we talked about the tours and things like that and all the people involved in making these films and these music videos, do you see how much money, effort, and actual like full body yes, like Miley Cyrus was saying, that goes into these projects only for them to just be funding the Warner Brother record label, right? So again, if he had known that, would he have made the same decisions? Would there have been a full body yes in the activities and the participation? Because legally he's, bound by it, but, would he have accepted the contract? That's one thing. And then the other side of it is if he had learned this throughout the contract, would there have been as much effort in this direction, right? And we only have to ask this because when he found out there was such a problem, which means maybe they avoided letting him know this information. Maybe he did not know this information to find clarity. Maybe he wasn't able to identify a problem in his contract. Maybe he never read it. I don't know. But the point here is that if you ask the questions and the record label rejects answering or is very vague, what should you think of that relationship? And then on the reverse, if someone asks you questions about something, about their artistry or about their leadership and their responsibilities, why would you reject what they're saying if you know they're looking for clarity? And so that's the key thing to understand. Because like I said, you may have yourself in this situation and you'll be offended because an artist is asking you, hey, where are you going?
He was one of the most valuable artists in the entire music industry. His albums had sold tens of millions of copies. His concerts filled arenas around the world. And Warner Brothers had made an enormous fortune distributing his music. So in 1992, Warner decided to lock their biggest star down for the long term. That year, Prince signed what was reported to be a $100 million contract with Warner Brothers. Records, one of the most lucrative deals in music at the time. On paper, it looked like a massive victory. Headlines described it as a historic partnership between a legendary artist and the label that helped build his career. But almost immediately, the relationship began to crack. Because the deal didn't solve the one issue Prince cared about most: control. Prince was famously one of the most prolific musicians in history. Inside his private recording complex, Paisley Park Studios in Chanhassen, Minnesota, he was constantly writing, recording, and producing new material. Sometimes he finished entire albums in a matter of weeks. The problem was that Warner Brothers didn't want that much music released. The label preferred long marketing cycles, one major album every year or two, followed by singles, tours, and promotion.
So do you see how there's now a difference in agendas, right? Do you see how now the artist's agenda does not align with the corporation's agenda? The reason the record label is doing what they're doing is because it makes sense. They have a system and a formula that is proven to them to work for music. The problem that they're having is that they've now signed a huge deal with an artist that has a go-getter mentality. They don't have a sit back and be predictable mentality, right? And so when we talk about the infrastructure of their mental health, when we talk about the things that they have to avoid to be successful, they now have in their hands ideally what you would want in a record label, but they're stuck in the idea of being a corporation and not pro artist, right? So they have to find a balance in that relationship to say, okay, we know what works, but we have to really figure out how we can manage this asset called a talent and keep it in a situation where they're happy, but also they're benefiting from the hard work that they're doing, right? So I can see now coming down the line, they're already going to hinder the amount of music and work he can put out, which is something stupid. I don't know why you would ever do that. But then they're also going to try to control what it is he makes, right? So if it's a certain hit that doesn't go with, let's say, the current trends, or if, let's say, the audience for some reason isn't really liking it, it's going to go against what their bottom line can make, right? So it's going to really change a lot of their relationship, which needs more clarity.
From a business standpoint, it made sense. Slower releases meant bigger campaigns and higher sales. But to Prince, it felt like a cage. He believed music should come out when it was created, not when a corporation decided it was convenient. Meanwhile, Warner controlled the release schedule, meaning dozens of finished songs were sitting in vaults while fans waited years between albums. Behind closed doors, meetings between Prince and Warner executives reportedly became tense. The artist who once saw the label as a partner was beginning to feel something very different, and that realization led Prince to a shocking discovery.
So do you notice how he said that when they had meetings, they started to get tense? Well, why do you think they got tense? Well, part of it is what I'm talking about when I say if someone asks you a question and you try not to bring clarity to the fullest extent, it creates frustration, especially with somebody who's in a position of leadership. And I know people don't view artists and sign the record labels as the leaders, but because he's literally the source of their product, he is the leader, right? And so when he was probably asking them, what is going to happen? Where are you going? What are you doing? They started giving him very vague, very short answers. And then when they seen that he had no clarity, they continued to give him vague and short answers, that of which brought no clarity. So he couldn't make a decision, right? And so now that he's in a situation where he's frustrated, he's in a situation where he doesn't have information, and the person he's asking for information is being a stone wall. They're only giving short answers. They're not trying to bring clarity, and they understand this. He now feels as though he's in a relationship with somebody who's weaponizing what they know against him. And that's not something you want to have with somebody who's the leader of your corporation that you signed $100 million deal with that can also bring you even more money. That is not how you want to do that. So it begs the question why they think what they're doing is correct. And it begs the question as to why they don't see being submissive in this point would be the beneficial thing for them.
Because the label didn't just control his music, they controlled his name too. June 7th, 1993. The night the name disappeared on the morning of June 7th, 1993, something strange landed in the fax machines of newsrooms and radio stations across the United States. It was a press release from Paisley Park Enterprises, Prince's own company in Chanhassen, Minnesota. At first glance, it looked like a typical announcement about the artist's future plans. But buried in the statement was a line that left journalists completely confused. Prince Rogers Nelson would no longer perform under the name Prince. Instead, he would be identified by a mysterious new symbol, a hybrid design combining the male and female signs, later known as the love symbol. There was just one problem. The symbol couldn't be pronounced. Suddenly, the biggest pop star in the world had a name that no one could actually say out loud. Radio DJs stared at the press release in disbelief. Newspaper editors debated how they were supposed to print it. Television anchors struggled to explain it on air. Within hours, media outlets had created a workaround. They began calling him the artist formerly known as Prince.
And so now you're seeing what he's doing, right? You would think that somebody who has a bunch of clarity in their career and has a great relationship with the record label would not need to do this, right? And so when we point this out to you guys, it's just to show you the truth, and your intention for learning has to be a priority. Because if he went into this deal knowing what was going to happen, I don't think he would have changed his name. I don't think he would have, probably worked with them, seeing the access to the studios he had, right? And so now that I'm saying this, do you see how much different you should be thinking when it comes to bringing clarity to conversations you have and actually being upfront about the information you know? Because you could have a situation where someone like Prince, who can work as hard as they do, actually like and love and respect working for you. But instead, because of whatever reason, they decided not to bring clarity when he asked them questions. When he asked them, where are you going? They decided to say, oh, just, I'm going somewhere. Instead of bringing clarity, knowing that that's what he's looking for. So now they're causing a fracture, a rift into their relationship, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences, which means they now have to change how they market things. They now have to change how they promote anything, because the artist formerly known as Prince is the one that they have. They don't have this new symbol that he trademarked. And so this is the conversation that most people need to know, but at least for an artist, do you see how much power it is that you have when it comes to the decisions you make? This is why you need to ask the questions for clarity, and then pay very close attention to how people answer your questions for the sake of leadership, not just for the sake of curiosity or you just want to know things. It has to literally be for the sake of leadership. Will the person you're talking to answer the question or not? That's the point. Because if you do it for just information, then we can give you any information. If you do it for just curiosity, then we can just have small talk. But if you're trying to really see if somebody is going to be honest and integral with what they're saying and doing, this is the power that you have. That's the important part. And it's a practice. Most people you're going to do this with, they're not going to participate. They're going to frown up and they're not going to want to do it. And they're going to give you short answers, like his record label right here, right? You would assume the, biggest record label in the United States would just easily answer their biggest artists' questions, right? You would think that would be the case, but no. Your closest loved ones all the way up to the biggest record label in the United States will do this exact same thing. So that's why it's important to understand it and know how to navigate it.
Anchors struggled to explain it on air. Within hours, media outlets had created a workaround. They began calling him the artist formerly known as Prince. Late-night comedians had a field day with it. Many people assumed Prince had simply pulled a bizarre publicity stunt to stay in the spotlight. Others believed he had finally gone completely off the rails. Even inside the music industry, confusion spread quickly. Warner Brothers executives were reportedly caught off guard by the announcement, and suddenly every interview, press conference, and album promotion became awkward, because the name Prince had vanished overnight. But behind the headlines and the jokes, Prince wasn't being eccentric for attention. He was making a calculated move. But the plan didn't immediately break the contract the way Prince had hoped. Warner still controlled the release of his music, and the label wasn't about to let its biggest star slip away quietly. And that's when Prince decided to turn his quiet rebellion into something much louder. Because soon, the world would start seeing a single word written across his face. The slave protest that shocked the music industry if the symbol confused the music industry. What Prince did next made the situation impossible to ignore. By 1994, his battle with Warner Brothers Records had turned into a full-blown public protest. Prince wasn't just fighting the label behind closed doors anymore. He wanted the entire world to see what he believed was happening to artists inside the music business. And he chose a dramatic way to show it. Prince began appearing in public with the word slave written across his cheek.
So the reason something like this was so shocking was because what people identify as a leader, as a power position, is usually discounted with the effort that they have to commit to. With the, I guess you can say what's the word I'm looking for? The performance standard that they have to commit to, right? And so the reason this is a controversial part is because you're supposed to have some kind of authority that comes with the leadership that you're granted, right? And so when he probably realized how much money he's making them, how much effort he's putting in, and then how much authority he has, that's where he drew the connection, right? So this is why it's controversial, because a lot of people who are watching this and a lot of people who've seen his story and grew up could not fathom feeling like a slave while being paid that money, right? It didn't make sense in their head. But the issue that most people have when they're observing something like this is the same issue I was explaining when they get asked the question and they bring a vague answer, is that they can't see the authority being disrespected. That's the part that most people are going to miss when it comes to this conversation. The authority is the thing that Prince was battling over. They already paid him the money. He invested the money where it was supposed to go. You can see that in his career. But now that he wants to exercise his authority, he can't do so. So what does that make him? And so when people think of themselves, they think of like, oh, I work a job and I get paid, but I can't, change the company policies. I'm just like him. And that's not the case, because you have the option to just walk away. You don't have any personal intellectual property tied to this company, and you're probably not an investor for equity and things like that in the company. So you're literally an at-will employee. That's not the same thing. What we're looking at is a contractual obligation here that also strips him of the rights of the authority to things that he himself created. It's not like he's doing a service, like he's not cutting a lawn where the lawn is just going to be a thing. These things would not exist. They would not have been considered had he had not made it out the womb. And so the issue that most people are going to have with this conversation is being able to apply that logic to themselves and then look at Prince as the authority, and not apply this logic to themselves and look at themselves as some kind of empathetic creature who's, noticing this. This is something that you're going to see today. This is something you're going to see with an artist tomorrow. This is going to happen with an artist you actually like, with people you actually like who are in the music industry. And so when I have this conversation and you think about like, oh man, I wonder how this really affects, I don't know, Finesse 2 Times. He can be affected the exact same way, and we've seen this.
It was happening to artists inside the music business, and he chose a dramatic way to show it. Prince began appearing in public with the word slave written across his cheek. The message first shocked audiences during television appearances and live performances. Fans watching closely noticed the word printed clearly on his face as he played. Interviews became tense. Reporters asked what it meant, and Prince didn't hide his feelings. He believed that artists who signed major record deals were often trapped in contracts where companies controlled their music, their image, and their release schedules, sometimes for decades. To Prince, the situation felt like creative imprisonment.
So how many artists can you think of that are signed, whether it's a big record label or a small one, that have to deal with that? Now, it's something that we don't want to talk about because we really like these artists, but I want you to consider your favorite artist and how consistent they are in their image, their brand, and then look at their output of music, right? Does it resemble anything that looks formulaic, or does it resemble something that you think an artist would do, right? So there's a balance you can find between like release dates and artistry and stuff like that and business. But what he's highlighting here is that Warner probably has a formula or system for their artists that seems to be way more formulaic than a natural artist tends to like. And so what you may see is, if you have a favorite artist right now, and you can probably pull up their website and pull up their Instagram and see what they look like, do you notice some kind of consistent formulaic branding to what they're doing? And now you have to ask and answer to yourself, again, bringing clarity and not just doing these one word vague answers. Actually bring clarity to the question by saying, what would be the reason for this to occur? Okay. And if you come up with a bunch of reasons, then it could be a combination of them, but you have to figure out, why would your favorite artist sign a deal with a record company that would help them do this? Okay. So when we look at Prince and we seen all of the things he was doing and how hard he was working and how much money he was making, and then how many songs he could create and how much productivity he could create, why would he sign with a record label that's telling him, well, cut back on productivity, actually say it this way, actually look like this instead of giving him the quote unquote creative freedom and then working alongside him? Why would they do that, right? Or why would he sign with them, right? And the real answer that we can come up with is that he may not have known that was what comes with it, which could be them, hiding information, or it could be just a lack of understanding. But either way, that's the key thing here. There's clarity missing in this relationship. And so if you knew you had Prince and he was asking for clarity, would you give it to him? And if you were Prince and you didn't have the clarity for your record contract, knowing the information we know in hindsight, unfortunately, would you ask the questions? And what kind of answers would you expect from your record label?
Interviews became tense. Reporters asked what it meant, and Prince didn't hide his feelings. He believed that artists who signed major record deals were often trapped in contracts where companies controlled their music, their image, and their release schedules, sometimes for decades. To Prince, the situation felt like creative imprisonment. One of the most talked about moments came at the 1995 Brit Awards in London, when Prince stepped onto the stage to accept the award for International Male Solo Artist. Detention between him and the industry was already well known, but his acceptance speech made things even more uncomfortable. Standing in front of the crowd, Prince delivered a short but pointed statement. Prince, the best? The gold experience is better. On stage, free. On record, slave. Then he walked off. The room didn't quite know how to react. Some artists in the audience applauded quietly. Others looked stunned. Industry executives reportedly felt blindsided by the very public criticism aimed at record labels. But while the protest grabbed headlines, Prince was already planning something even more strategic behind.
So one of the things that I've noticed in these conversations is that a lot of times when we see artists do this, they complain or they find an opportunity to actually highlight some of the things that's going on in the industry. I wonder, what do fans actually think? What are they actually doing, right? Like when you watch the news and you see like a horrible story of like someone being a victim of something terrible, right? Generally, you kind of assume most people feel bad and they, want it to not happen and things like that, right? But when it comes to something like this and you loved the outcome of what he suffered through, how do you feel about what he's saying? Because he's technically talking about everyone. He's not just talking about the record labels. There are people who were invested in the exact same outcomes, but they weren't in the authority position as him, or they probably didn't consider the authority that he had. Like nobody was saying, "Hey Prince, I just found out the record label I work for is trying to, pigeonhole your talent." Like I don't think anybody was warning him, giving him a heads up. Pretty sure there were some people who made a lot of money on the side. A lot of people who were fans that probably were scalping tickets. Like you guys bought merch, you probably bootleg CDs. There's a lot of things that went on that were causing his suffering. And I don't know if everybody is really considering that when he gets up on stage and says what he says, because of the results that we got after. So when we look at the artists today, and we notice it now that we almost never hear these complaints today. Like that's why Finesse 2 Times story was actually kind of viral, is because we almost never hear these stories. Is it because artists are now going into the game with clarity, or are they no longer asking these questions now? Because people like to act like there's no more Princes and no more, Michael Jacksons. But the issue is that I don't think you guys can identify them because you've been told what they were since a Prince, since a Michael Jackson. So I don't think you guys can really see true raw musical talent and artistry without someone giving you a helping hand, or it being literally smushed down your face every day, like I say with Apple Music.
National male solo artist, Detention. Between him and the industry was already well known, but his acceptance speech made things even more uncomfortable. Standing in front of the crowd, Prince delivered a short but pointed statement. Prince, the best? The gold experience is better. On stage, free. On record, slave. Then he walked off. The room didn't quite know how to react. Some artists in the audience applauded quietly. Others looked stunned. Industry executives reportedly felt blindsided by the very public criticism aimed at record labels. But while the protest grabbed headlines, Prince was already planning something even more strategic behind the scenes. Because instead of simply fighting Warner Brothers, he was about to outmaneuver them completely. Prince was quietly setting up the move that would truly shake Warner Brothers. And it had nothing to do with courtrooms or lawsuits. Instead, Prince decided to beat the label at its own game. Inside Paisley Park Studios in Chanhassen, Minnesota, Prince had already built one of the most advanced private recording complexes in the world. Unlike most artists who spent months creating an album, Prince worked at a pace that stunned even veteran producers. He could write, record, arrange, and produce entire songs in a single night.
Okay, the reason why hearing that it was so amazing to them is because people looked at music like people look at jobs today. When I say I'm a musician, all this shit that he just named is the standard for me. Like that's just base kit. That's just normal. Like that should just be every musician in my mind, right? But the problem is that when you talk to other musicians, you guys don't have this kind of outlook on your career. Like you guys are just a guitar player, just a trumpet player. You just sing. You just rap. And that's the part that dwindles down your value in the music industry, which made everybody so attracted to him, because he actually was a through and through thoroughbred artist for the sake of being an artist, right? So now when you're considering instruments, when you're considering music theory, when you're considering studying, networking, business, creation, and actual engineering, when we talk about being intentional with learning, you know all of these skills exist. Why are you not pursuing them? Right? Why don't you have your own studio singing TikToker girl and things like that, right? Well, the real reason is that it will now cause you to make different decisions. You will now start doing a lot of things differently. Your lifestyle would change, and you will view people differently. You will view relationships differently, because you're now in the authority position. You're no longer just working for money. You're not no longer trading time for money. You now are in control of something. And so for most people, being in control of something looks a certain way or has a certain stigma. So if, for example, you are the person that's going to be asking questions to your record label and they give you very vague answers and they know you're asking them questions, that is going to look a certain way to you now, because you now have the authority over your creativity. That question would be fine if you didn't care, weren't invested, or if you, just didn't understand what you're doing. But now that you're in a position to know these things, you have to think differently. And for most artists, this is hard to do because it changes everything. Like, you no longer can just make music in your TikTok and your social media and just post it. Now you got to figure out who's heard it, who you made it with, how the splits are going to be, why you're putting it out, should you market it, how you're going to market it, is it going to be on a project, is it going to be a standalone project? Do you post it online with a video? Do you post it online with just a lyric video? What kind of visualizers are going with it? When you are out and about networking, how can you get it into people's hands? Is it going to be a QR code? Is it going to be a link? Is it going to be word of mouth for the streaming sites? Are streaming sites worth it? Should you make this an exclusive project? All of this thinking that you have to do, most of you guys are going to reject it, and you're going to feel like this is too much work. I don't want to do it. And then you got to think about your health, your fitness, your mental health, all these other things that we looked at with Lady Gaga, we looked at with DMX. You can no longer just do drugs for fun. You can no longer just fuck bitches for fun. You can't just hang out with your friends for fun. This is now, you're in an authoritative position. So you'll find yourself as an artist spending a lot of time in a studio, spending a lot of time in a recording room, trying to create, trying to make projects. And so people are looking at Prince like he's doing something extravagant, and he's not. He's just committed to his occupation. Just like if I were a businessman, right? And so now that we understand that, now he's asking for authority. Why do you think he's getting resistance from everybody? Why do you think everybody's trying to look at him as some kind of outlier in the industry? Well, the reality is exactly what he pointed out in his interviews when he started writing The Name Slave, is that he probably started having conversations with other artists and started experiencing how little skill they brought to the marketplace, which then shaped their conversation and perspective on learning about the industry, on being in an authoritative position in the industry. They are probably more okay with sitting back and allowing a lawyer to look over their contract, sitting back and allowing their record label to fund their studio time, sitting back and just allowing a producer to write the music, allowing another writer to come up with the lyrics. They're okay with that. So when you have an authoritative conversation in leadership, it's almost like speaking a different language to them. So he probably felt ostracized. He probably felt alone in terms of his perspective, which causes these outbursts, these tantrums and things like that. Now, we can sit up here and say, oh, it's bad for business and things like that. But you got to remember, this is an artist we're talking about. So that's why I'm bringing this video the way it is to shine a light on how we look at artists, how we call ourselves fans, how we invest in these people, but then we treat them this way. So it's like if you knew your child doesn't like vegetables, right? Every time you feed them vegetables, they don't like it. As a parent, eventually you're going to realize that the detriment of not eating vegetables is going to supersede their happiness of enjoying foods that aren't vegetables, right? So you have to make a decision. But the issue that you have as a parent is that you have the authority. And so if the authority isn't respected, then you're going to have an issue committing to leadership. But this works the same way with the record label. If your record label knows that, well, if we don't pay you for what you're worth, it's going to supersede the value that you bring to us with all these songs that you make and all this money. So they have to make an authoritative position, that of which should have been with respect to his authority and creation, right? So it'd be like if your child doesn't like vegetables, you don't just force feed them vegetables, right? You have to kind of get them to understand it, bring clarity, like I'm suggesting throughout this entire video. Maybe give them a little bit at a time, help get them, help them walk them through it, because you're in the authoritative position and they're in the authoritative position to control their sensibilities and their tastes and stuff like that, right? But all in all, you understand more than them the benefit of what you're giving them, right? And so you have to either give that much more clarity to them so they're on the same page with you, or you have to get them there slowly, But the point is, your intention is to bring clarity. It's not to give vague answers. It's not to avoid answering their questions that they ask, or it's not even to avoid the problem. It's to get directly to what it is that you are trying to get them to do and allowing them to get to the same page as you. For some reason, it took them forever to figure that out with Prince. And it must have been because they either disagreed with what we're explaining right now in this video, meaning that they didn't view the position he was in as a problem. They must have been completely resisting this, because as if I can figure this out in a 10-minute video and we can all look at this as fans and say, yeah, that's messed up. Why would Warner not submit and be submissive to their leader when it comes to this situation?
By the mid-1990s, Paisley Park's vault reportedly contained hundreds of unreleased tracks. Warner had been slowing down his output for years because they believed releasing music too quickly would damage sales. Prince now realized that the very thing Warner feared most could become his escape route. If the label wanted albums from the artist formerly known as Prince, he would give them more music than they could handle. Beginning in 1994, Prince started delivering projects to Warner at an aggressive pace. Albums like Come, 1994, and The Gold Experience, 1995, were released while tensions between the artist and the label were still boiling over publicly. Then things moved even faster. In 1996, Prince released Chaos and Disorder, a project he openly described as fulfilling contractual obligations. It wasn't marketed like his previous albums, and Prince made it clear that he viewed the record as a final step toward freedom.
So do you see how now your personal life and your business life is now bleeding into what the fans are receiving now? Now the fans aren't getting like full-fledged, authentic, full-body yes music. They're getting propaganda, warfare music, beef music between an artist and his own record label. And that's what they have to bring home. That's what they work hard with their money with and go pay tickets to go see, and they spend their money on merch on. And that's what made it probably so painful for Prince, because he's looking at people that respect and love and seek the best for him, but he has to treat them this way because of the relationship he has with his record label. So again, as I point this stuff out all through the weeks and stuff like that, do you now see him a little differently? Like if he was a 12-year-old singing boy in church, do you now see his career a little bit differently now?
Behind the scenes, the strategy was simple. Complete the deal as quickly as possible. Instead of waiting years between albums the way Warner preferred, Prince flooded the contract with music until the agreement finally reached its end. And when that moment arrived, the artist who had spent years fighting for control was finally ready to reclaim something he had given up long ago: his name. The revolution ends, 2000 to 2014. For years, Prince had fought one of the most unusual battles in music history. He changed his name, challenged one of the biggest record labels in the world, and turned his own career into a public protest about artist control. But the real turning point finally arrived in 2000. That year, Prince's long contract with Warner Brothers Records officially expired. After nearly 2 decades tied to the label that helped launch his career, the agreement that had once felt like a cage was finally over. And almost immediately, Prince made an announcement that fans had been waiting years to hear. He was taking back his name. After spending most of the 1990s known as the artist formerly known as Prince, he revealed that he would once again perform under the name Prince. When asked about the decision, he delivered a short but powerful statement: "The revolution is over." For the first time since the early days of his career, Prince was completely free to release music however he wanted. No corporate release schedules, no restrictions on how often he could create. The artist who had spent years fighting the system could now operate entirely on his own terms.
Do you see how long it took to do that though? So when they talk about like deals with the devil and things like that and don't sign with record labels, do you see what all they took from him? Like just think about everything we talked about this week. Like you got to think about the lifestyle he was living. You got to think about the mental health, the arguments, the disagreements, the relationships he probably gained and lost, the musical changes. We probably have like things that are different that would have been. And so all of that happened for more than 2 decades of his human existence, right? High cortisol levels. I don't know if he works out and things like that, what he was eating. It's, you know, he's a musician at the end of the day. All of that was going through the existence of him signing this contract, right? It's not like he signed this contract, like I said, and he started asking these questions, and Warner was like easily flowing with him, and they had a great relationship the whole time. And 20 years later, they just kind of let it go. No, this was rife with like struggle and, you know, a lot of like disagreement and things like that. And so when we think about what I was saying about this little boy right here, like if this little boy is who we look at as musicians today, what do we expect of them when it comes to the music industry? Like, do we really think this little boy is going to go through what he went through? Right. And if we do, what is our expectations and plans for, let's say, the next musicians, the newer musicians? Everybody's like, oh, I can't wait for the new song. Or y'all like diddy bop into a bunch of different jingles and stuff like that. But the effort it takes to be what you respect as a musician can take 20 years of your life and all of your IP. So just keep that in mind.
And he didn't waste time. Throughout the early 2000s, Prince embraced new ways of releasing music, experimenting with direct-to-fan distribution and internet releases long before most major artists even considered the idea.
And you remember we talked about direct-to-consumer and how that's actually being systemized to the record labels as well. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. But again, thinking about the 12-year-olds today and what they're going to be signing and things like that.
The story wasn't completely finished yet, because even though Prince had escaped the contract, there was still one thing he wanted back more than anything else: the recordings that defined his legacy. And more than a decade later, he would finally win that battle too, which meant that the strange night in 1993, when Prince erased his own name, had actually set something much bigger in motion.
So yeah, a lot of times we don't ever consider these things. We look at artists and our great favorites and stuff like that, and we just say, oh man, they're dope, man, that's crazy they're going through something, and then we just keep scrolling on TMZ, right? But like I said, these are humans, these are real people. But the thing is that there is, for some weird reason, when someone asks a question, you don't want to answer it, right? And it's not even a sense of like, I don't think I should. It's like I said, it's a test of authority, and that's all it is. And so let's get into our next clip, and let's start to see how the music business has a dark and bright side.
Their own masters. Now, in music contracts, the transfer of ownership of the rights to the masters from one person to another is called assignment. So if you see a contract where it says the artist assigns the rights to the master recordings over to the label, that means that you're transferring the ownership of the rights to the masters to the label.
So, okay. He explained that pretty basically, but that's kind of the point, is that it's such a basic term that you could breeze right over it, right? And so the reason why we want lawyers and stuff like that to read over our contracts is not necessarily just to, you know, be rude or just to make it tougher on our friends who we're trying to do business with, but it's because I don't think many people would have tied that context to the word assign, giving the relationship that they're getting into, right? So if somebody like is signing you for $1 million and you see the word assign to the contract, once you understand that context, you might change how you view this particular contract going the rest of the pages, right? And so with that, that's a part of what I'm talking about when I say bringing clarity. Like, you have to be able to witness and see and observe and notice problems, and then also be able to attack them as far as bringing a solution or a decision forth, right? So then when that happens and you ask somebody, hey, let me go over this contract with my lawyer, I don't really know what's going on, and they tell you, well, you don't have to do that. Do you think that brings you clarity? And if it does not, why would you then commit to doing that? And that's the part I need us all to understand. If someone asks a question and things like that about, you know, their authority figure position, then you have to really make sure your intention, or you're intentional about how you answer it and whether or not it actually brings clarity, y'all.
Things over to the label, that means that you're transferring the ownership of the rights to the masters to the label. And this is permanent. Okay, so even if you may have paid off any advance that they might have given you or whatever, it doesn't matter. They will own those for the rest of your life. They even own them after you die. Okay, this is a permanent transfer. So hopefully you can see right there one of the reasons why everybody wants to own the masters. Because whoever owns the master, they're able to collect income on that recorded piece of music for a long period of time. Okay, so they're the ones that are getting all the royalties, all the revenue that relates to the sale and the use and public performance of the recording itself. So the ownership of master rights has now become a really big topic. Because of digital distribution and streaming primarily, it's meant that music generates an income over a longer period of time than it used to. So in the older days, when labels used to have to manufacture and distribute and then put into record stores all the records that they were then about to promote and spend all this money on marketing, they would make their income in quite a short period of time. It was like a lot of effort, a lot of manufacture, big moment, hype it up, promote it, try to sell it as best you can. And then once that moment had passed, really that was the key moment in time in which you would make the money. There would be some residual sales, but generally speaking, it's that at that moment in time of release.
And that's kind of what Prince realized when he was dumping out all that music so quickly. He was like, their process can't even function with this level of thinking. And that's why being an artist is so important in society, because only a creative person, not even just an artist, but a creative and innovative mind could think of something like that, right? To say, okay, this process doesn't work for what I want to do. Like many people cannot do that. You can see businessmen that work in restaurants. You can see old laundromats and like warehouses, shipping container foremen and stuff like that, that will not adhere to that kind of thinking. And so you can make millions of dollars and think, do what works, do what works, do what works, or you can make millions of dollars innovating. And the only issue is that it's not predictable to innovate. It's very risky to innovate, right? So if you have a situation where you as a musician, even at the time where you're in a good contract, like you're not in a struggle with your record label, but you have like 20, 30 songs you're putting out in a month, their process for marketing all of that is not going to help you. Even if they want to, it's going to be expensive for them. They're going to probably run out of resources in general as far as manpower and things like that. So in order for that to make that relationship work, they almost have to slow you down, right? Even still, even with a good relationship with them. And so when you have a situation now with streaming, owning the masters means we can just duplicate this little file for kilobits and then just send it out and people can love it and things like that. After that, we can just keep making videos. We can do flashbacks. We can do remasters. We can do remixes. We can do AI versions. There's so many more things we can do with this now. But back then, when you had to get a CD printed, posters, flyers, and planned shows and venues to get people out to listen to the music because it wasn't readily available in the palm of their hand, the idea of creating a song became way more serious. And that's why I'm pointing this out too, is that it's still serious, it's just easier. So now when you have artists creating music on TikTok and they're just uploading it, I cringe at that shit because I know that every time you post on that new song, you're not getting paid for it. That master belongs to TikTok. And they think they own it because of the idea of like copyright. But really you own the credit. Like that's all you get. We know you made it, but as far as like you getting paid income and being able to license it out and you own it, we can't do nothing with it. You're protected by the law. No, we can do all types of stuff. I can take your little sound, make a whole new TikTok with it, talking over it, telling you how I don't like it or do like it, and then make a content video, with visuals. I can do all kinds of content about you, and it's legal. So how do you have the authority over that? And that's the part that most artists hate, because if you need the authority, then that means you have to rethink this whole process like the record labels would. You'd have to rethink all the music you want to put on TikTok for free, for fun with your friends when you're doing drugs, to now highly curated content and project management skills have to be now employed, right? This is a completely different skill set you have to tap into, and almost a different personality you have to tap into. And so as I explain this, yes, all of you will say, yup, you're right, I get it. But then when we apply it, we can see how it's few and far between the musicians who are willing to learn multiple instruments, multiple languages, tackle their health and fitness, and then at the same time be of benefit to the music industry. It's very few and far between you're going to see that.
Really, that was the key moment in time in which you would make the money. There would be some residual sales, but generally speaking, it's that at that moment in time of release. Whereas now, music gets released and will sit and people will play this, and every time it's played or streamed, every time it's streamed, it creates income. So income is generated for a lot longer period of time. So it's not as important for a label to only try to invest in something that's going to be a hit record straight away. They realise that you can make an album, put the album out, your fans will listen to that over many years, and that will keep generating income. So bands and artists can have very successful recording incomes without really actually having big hits. It just sits there and it brings in money over a longer period of time. In addition to this, if music now gets used in a film or an advert, or something happens that just generates new interest in the artist or that piece of music, labels don't have to distribute loads of records into the store and try and chase down that demand. It's just sat there on a streaming platform. People can go to it and play it instantly. So that's what happens. So the shelf life of music has been widened because of streaming.
Yep. And you also don't have to worry about fans having like the right technology. Honestly, most streaming and tech companies have figured out how to be platform agnostic. So they're not stuck on a certain phone or a certain website and things like that. Like you can, go to your laptop, to the kiosk, to damn near your car's interface to find our music now.
Just how much money can be made in the long term from the ownership of the master rights is resulting in not just the majors buying up all these rights, but also venture capitalists and investment groups. This is becoming a real investment bubble, if anything. People are buying this thinking that it's going to go up in value in the longer term as the income streams keep growing. People are buying up master rights like they buy up real estate. And the artists that did keep hold of their master rights back in the old days have ended up being quite big artists. They're now getting offered eye-watering amounts. You can't blame them for selling off the masters. Now, in my opinion, it was always unfair that labels retained the ownership of the masters for such a long time. I get that in the older days, they had the costs of recording and greater financial risk to promote and market individual releases. I get that. There should have been a period of time that they could have them for. But retaining them for that length of time just doesn't seem right.
Now, as he explains it, I actually kind of might have changed my opinion a little bit. I think if you're going to sign the contract to sell your catalog or your masters and stuff like that, I think how long they retain it shouldn't matter. I think that if you negotiated for them to have it, they have it. The other side of this is that I think when we're talking about owning a masters and stuff like that, the concept of it seems to be more so around how I can flip it and turn it into money. But it makes me start to think well, if an artist looks at their masters and all of their music as something they can just sell off, then that's what they look at it as, right? Me personally, I wouldn't do that, right? If somebody comes to me and they're like, for some reason, your catalog is worth a $1 billion, right? I would be thinking, how do I figure out what they just learned about my catalog? That's what I would be thinking. I wouldn't be thinking, oh yeah, give me the $1 billion. I wouldn't be saying that. And so that's me personally. But now I'm starting to consider kind of what Prince was probably going through, where if I had a conversation with another artist and they're telling me, yeah, I would have taken the money and sold my catalog, I would start to think that either they don't care about the catalog to the point of, well, how much more money could you have made if you kept it? And then they don't care about the catalog in the sense of it was never sentimentally theirs. There was no true intrinsic value to them. It was like a cheeseburger to sell. It's kind of like if you sold your kids. At one point, it's do you care about the kid? Your kid may be super cool or super smart, but it's it's your kid. You can't get another one of those. So that's where I'm kind of starting to lean now with what he's saying. I think if you're going to sell your catalog, the record label, if you negotiate for them to keep it forever, then they get to keep it forever. I think the T.I. Sync deal is probably a great example of how you should better manage that. You should set up stipulations after a certain amount, I get it back, or after a certain time, I get it back, or things like that. I think that would make more sense. But again, you have to be an artist that wants to know this stuff. You have to be an artist that's willing to go learn this stuff. You can't just sit back and think your record label is going to show you this information and protect you like Finesse 2 Times' record label.
How is it justifiable that recording executives that are employed today are making tons of money off of a recording that was made 50 years ago?
Well, it's because they negotiated that. It's not really fair. It's just negotiated.
By an artist who's still alive today and makes no money from it whatsoever.
And I think part of that is because the artist more than likely got screwed. Like, meaning like they did not know what they're signing and still signed it, or they needed clarity and still signed it. Because I don't think the artist would willingly walk into this deal and say, I don't want any money for my catalog. You take the money and keep it in perpetuity, right? So I think that's where he's coming from for the unfair part. The other side of what he's saying, dark and bright side, like we're doing here, is that the artist needs to be aware of this. Like, you have to know that you could walk away from a deal negotiating, like he's saying, the assignment of your rights to an executive. You need to know that. And in order for you to know that, it's going to change how you look at music. It's going to change how you probably create music, all kinds of things. So that's why I'm saying this is a thing that is almost, it feels like a human nature problem to me, but it's like it's a cultural thing. We're asking questions and getting clarity for the sake of authority, not curiosity. Authority. Like, if someone asks you, it's, you have to answer because of who they are, not because of how you feel about the question, right? I think that part is kind of stigmatizing artists learning, artists having the ability to be intentional about learning, because I just don't think somebody would sign no deal about, or with the stipulations that he's laying on purpose, right? So he would have to be talking about something that's like not uncommon, but very specific. Like, you're signing a deal where you get no money and they're making money off of you forever, and you're still alive and signed and you're not mad. Like, yeah, that's a very specific situation.
I totally understand all the legal and contractual clauses that result in that scenario, but from a moral integrity point of view, it just doesn't smell right, does it? Then, in addition to the ongoing streaming income that the major labels are making, they also received huge payouts and sometimes even equity or shares in some of these streaming platforms such as Spotify. And the artists are not entitled to actually receive any of that money.
Here's how I would solve this. I think tech companies, and we should find a way to define this, I think music-centered tech companies should be tied to a royalty collection system, right? And then what then happens is, whenever they sell or whenever they get like a partnership or a merger, I think that should affect the, I guess you can say, equity of the artists on the platform. I think we should do that, because what would then happen is Spotify would then have to audit and be very clear on who they would define as an artist, like who they want to pay. And then on the other hand, if they do decide to sell or get a merger, it benefits the people on the platform versus us just spending time doing that here. Now, the reason this is going to be important is because it's going to be that audit for who's an artist. If everybody's just on Spotify just throwing up paint on the wall, then there's going to be no money left. But if we can start to kind of like define what an artist is, define what a successful project is, define what a stream is and stuff like that, then I think we can find a more finite way to solve this problem. And it'll be from the tech companies designed for music, right? Because Apple Music is technically not a music platform, even though it has it in there. It's got podcasts, movies, all kinds of shit in there, right? I think iTunes should be something that has equity in the royalty systems that it utilizes. All of them. Worldwide, CSAC, BMI, all of them. Because it'll be a way for us to build relationships with actual artists, because they're going to audit who's on their platform. But it also provides it provides clarity to what it is the agenda is for tech companies, right? So if you're trying to make money and, you know, I'm an artist and I'm looking at your platform, I should be able to tell that based on your behaviors, right? But what's happening now is with Spotify, they're shrouding themselves under like podcasts, AI music, the playlist thing, and like the environment of being a listener, right? That's really the point. So it seems more like a chat room than an actual platform to sell records, right? And so that's where they get that gray area from. It seems like you guys just want to hang out and play around with music and stuff, right? But the reality is that we're trying to get paid on there, and we're putting out like hard working projects into like massive studios, and then we're putting it on platforms like this where they get a fraction of a penny. So this is why record labels are doing it. The record labels are doing it in the sense of, well, they have equity in the company, so they're putting their artists on there. Their artists are getting streams on there. And for some reason, like I said, because artists aren't looking for the information to be intentional about learning, they're not picking up instruments, they're not learning legalese, they're not learning any other languages, they're not taking care of their fitness and their clarity of thinking. they're letting a lot of the money that they could be making slide because they're not demanding answers to the questions they could be having. So that's a lot of this issue that I have here. Like, this guy, he's a great person and great guy. I just think he's coming from the pro artist perspective instead of the macro perspective, right? The macro perspective would be like, he, as like, let's say if he was with ASCAP, should have a stake in what happens with the tech companies that are utilizing his music. And the only way we would know that is because he would be affiliated with ASCAP as an official artist and some kind of definition that we'd have to come up with as a collective, right? The reason I'm saying some kind of definition is because when we say artist, a lot of you think of your son who sings in church. He's not an artist. But unfortunately, he's represented as an artist in this conversation. So it muddies up and grays up the conversation. And when we talk about numbers and money, this is why it's hard to have these conversations with people who are not like Prince. Like, Prince would hear what I'm saying and he could bring probably more clarity and make corrections with what I'm saying and, you know, bring a lot of insight. Talking to a rapper like this is a conversation that they shy away from. And talking to like a singer or like some rock band dude, it has nothing to do with music or groupies or nothing like that. So it's not attractive. It's not a fun conversation. Now imagine having this conversation for 3 weeks at a time, 4 hours a day for 3 weeks straight. That's the type of negotiations you will be looking at when you have tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, like phone calls, emails, all types of shit. Most of you guys will walk away or you will delegate, and then you will be up in the air about clarity. And so people like Prince figured this out, and then they started to make better decisions. People like us, we watch this stuff and we just kind of hope that the record labels will do it better for us. And I don't think we should have that approach. I think we should just demand and then command what it is we have authority over, and then just respect the authority as is as artists.
The major labels had so much power because without them giving permission to use all their music catalogues, the streaming platforms would never have got off the ground. So a deal was done. And a cynical person...
So, do you see why I said what I said about the equity? He actually just laid it out a little bit. Let's go back and hear what he said.
And the artists are not entitled to actually receive any of that money. The major labels had so much power because without them giving permission to use all their music catalogues, the streaming platforms would never have got off the ground.
Okay, if the record labels didn't give license and permission to the tech companies to use the music created by the record labels' artists, the tech companies could not get up off the ground in terms of business. So, as we just learned what I just said, what do you think you could ask for as equity as an artist? Okay. So would it be equity in the record label, or would it be equity in the tech company, or would it be equity in both? Where would you ask for equity, or where do you think you could ask for equity rather? So now when I'm having these conversations, a lot of y'all just want to make music. Y'all just want to get on the mic and just rippity rap. Y'all want to do little freestyles in front of Breakfast Club and DJ Funk Flex. But when we start asking these questions, then it makes you kind of question, well, what does the record label expect of me? What does the record label get for this relationship with the tech company? Should I know? Like, am I in the position to know as an artist? Like, you don't know if Walmart is doing a deal with a new security company for their, asset protection side of things. Like, you don't know. But should you know if you're the reason the company exists and is functioning? Like, if Drake is the reason Spotify makes a huge chunk of their money, should Drake have equity in the company itself? Because we know his record label has equity in the tech company, but should the artist? Because the record label has to have the artist's product in order to make a deal with the tech company in the first place. It's like a quadruple layered Ponzi scheme, right? What should he be thinking? What should he be doing? What should he be asking? Are you guys looking for this information? Do you even care? Like, if Drake found out tomorrow he was going through the same stuff that Prince was going through, would you guys care? Would you guys support him as an artist in order to help him get through that kind of, situation? For the sake of business, not because of how you feel about him, just for the sake of like, like righting a wrong. If somebody went to jail and they shouldn't have, like, would you help him and invest in as fans to right that wrong? Or would how you feel about him supersede bringing clarity to what he's looking at?
So a deal was done. And a cynical person could argue that the deal that was done favoured the record labels, the major labels, with payouts and shares and dividend payments over what the artists get as a streaming royalty. It's a whole other topic, but just try to point out why they want to own the master rights. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for the major labels, because clearly there is. If you wanted to be an act that wants to break quickly, or you wanted to go global, they've got a formidable marketing machine that is going to be virtually impossible for you to replicate on your own. And even if you're signed with a pretty decent independent label, even they are not going to be able to do what a major label marketing department is going to be able to do for you. So yes, there's still a place for them. There's one final point I want to make about the owning of your masters, and it's not just about the money. There's something to be said for the ownership of your own material and being in control of all parts of your career. If you're in control of your masters and your songs, then you get to decide how they're used. It's up.
Okay, another thing that just popped in my head. He said something like, he's 100% right. But another thing that popped in my head was, he's bringing so much clarity to many musicians who are going to watch this, and as well as fans who may not have known this. But I want you to pay attention to the messenger for a second. Let's look at his identity. Do you think you could relate to a person like this? Do you think if you saw him walking down the street, just buying a cup of coffee, that you would think he had this much insight on something so valuable to you as a musician? Right? And so I'm highlighting this right now is because as I'm listening to him, I'm starting to just listen. I forgot that there's actually people who would hear what he's saying and be turned off. Like they would be bored, or, they wouldn't respect him for who he is or something like that. Like they would find a reason to not pay attention to what he's saying right now. And that it's tripped out, but it's because of maybe how you look at him, or maybe how you look at the position he is, maybe how he's speaking, or, whatever it is. But the point is that this is a part of how, as an artist, you're going to have to navigate finding clarity. You might have to have a sit down conversation for 2 hours with a person like this, respectively, because you find value and respect them, right? Not off some like leechy stuff, like you want their help and you just want to, consume what they're offering. So there is a fine tuning little like love and respect you have to have for like the music industry that he's highlighting here when he says like the moral integrity part of things. But you also have to look at it from like, okay, if I'm a super hood rapper dude and I keep rapping about making millions and making money and coming out the hood one day, wouldn't it make sense to get clarity on how that works through music? And would it come from somebody who's still in the hood, still thinking the way I think? Or would it be kind of like transcending all cultures? Like, wouldn't most cultures understand what it is you're trying to do if you said it in plain English? And so if you can think that way, then you should be able to look at something like this and still get an immense level of value. But like I said, this is going to be hard to do because some of y'all would look at him and just think like, oh, he probably just plays a genre of music I don't like, so he wouldn't get it. Or he probably doesn't listen to my music, so he wouldn't get it.
To you whether they'd get used in a Coke advert, or whether your lyrics got rewritten to appear in some crummy radio jingle that you're not really that happy with, or whether they get re-released as a part of a greatest hits album, or I don't know, anything else that could happen that might piss you off in some way that you're not sure about. You're in control of this. You get to decide how it suits your career and what it is that you want to do. Being in control like this will probably make you less money in the short term, but give you the greatest chance of long-term income and sustainable career.
And as people learn that, like I said, the reason they will resist that is because they now have to change how they think about their lifestyle. You don't have to function with an authoritative mindset. You can no longer just keep making music because it's fun. You can no longer keep publishing music because it's new. You have to kind of think now. You have to slow down, think, be very precise, and almost reject things that are comfortable to you, right? So like some of you, you're hanging out with your friends and they like to drink, they like to party, and they like to, they be in a studio. They're lit, as we call it, right? But they're also not invested. They don't have the leverage, and they definitely don't have the authority. So then where should all of the effort and participation come from when we think about leadership and being intentional about finding clarity? That's how we look at this thing. when we're looking at things from a top-down perspective, right? As an artist, yes, you can do whatever you want. You know, there's stupid people doing stupid stuff all the time. But there's only going to be one chance you get to own your masters, make the most money out of it, and then control it at the same time.
Control like this will probably make you less money in the short term, but give you the greatest chance of long-term income and sustainable career. It's a gamble that you might regret. You might never make the sort of money that was offered to you in that big advance from the major to hand over all of your recorded rights. But I know way more stories of artists who regret signing over their rights than I know of artists who regret not doing so. I guess ultimately, if someone takes control of your masters, then you become like an artist for hire who's been paid off with a fee. And your music in some way has kind of been detached from who you are as an artist. Whereas if you retain control of your masters, then you are taking charge of your own business. And that is ultimately what you need to be aiming to do.
And that's a great point. I love how he did this. It was a dope video. He spit that better than most rappers could, right? And that's kind of my point about like looking at who's talking sometimes, like making sure we understand that the people we're talking to, we respect and we actually understand that they know we want clarity, right? He clearly knew there were artists out there that needed clarity and brought it. He brought very, 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 very good clarity. Now, when we're considering, let's say, looking at younger artists and newer artists, what is it that we expect of them? What do we plan on giving them? What do they want from us, right? These are the questions we avoid when we're starting to talk about business for the music side of things, right? We know our kids want to be in cool schools and stuff like that and play nice instruments and be on stage with the lights and stuff like that. But when we think about and really consider what it means to have, let's say, ownership, we probably don't know how to have that conversation with young artists. We probably don't know how to tell them their value through, I guess, a perceived prediction. Like there's no real formula to say, hey, if you do this amount of songs, you're going to make this amount of money, right? We don't know how to do that. So now when he's saying in that last clip, you may not make the amount of money offered to you if you were to sell your catalog, that part scares so many people away from being an artist, which for me tells me you don't have a full body yes in being an artist, right? And that only really is a problem for people that are trying to, like I said, look at their catalog as something to flip. If your catalog really does represent you, you would fight it like Prince. You would fight for it like Prince, right? But if it's really something that you just kind of like, I'll drop it off, then you would probably break up with it like a girlfriend, get a divorce with it like a wife. Like it just really wouldn't be that big of a deal to you, right? So, but if you really, really cherish something like that and you think it really is as valuable as you say it is, you wouldn't be letting it go. You wouldn't be lending it out and you wouldn't be offering it, right? You would have complete authoritative control and responsibility of it. So let us get into our last clip, and he's actually going to be breaking down, this is a different channel, but they'll be breaking down the, I guess you can say, process of getting into the music industry.
So without any further ado, let's get into this video and demystify the music business.
Shout out CH.
All right, so in having this conversation of truly understanding the music business, there's one foundational concept that I think you need to understand, and we're going to start here. This is the building blocks that all of this is truly built off of. In the business, there are two copyrights or buckets of copyrights that really everything is built off of. So what are those two buckets? And then we'll unpack them for you. Well, those buckets, if we draw us a nice little line here to divide this whole thing up, because again, this is the foundation that this whole business is built on and this whole video is built on. Over here on the left side, we have sound recordings. And over here on the right side, we have compositions. Some words that you might commonly hear associated with those two respective buckets. Over here on sound recordings, you might hear the word masters thrown around pretty commonly, kind of interchange with sound recordings. We'll get into what all that means. And over here with compositions, you might commonly hear words like publishing thrown around.
So how many of you know the difference between a sound recording and a composition? Let me know in the chat, because this is actually going to be very insightful for fans because it's going to bridge the gap between you being a fan and an investor. And this is also going to be good for artists, because you can now figure out how you can help other artists and also find investors in your fans by regurgitating this information. So this is what I mean. If you're a fan of, let's say, me, you guys call yourselves a fan of me, let's prove it, right? If you're a fan of me, did you know that you can actually, I'm just going to make this up, but did you know that you could actually invest in, let's say, beats for me to buy? And because you invest in beats for me to buy, I can offer you executive producer credits because you've chosen the beats that I use. Did you know you could do that? If you didn't know you can do that, then that's because you just didn't have the information. But you could do that. And we talked about that earlier, where we were saying how you can get angel investors and people like that to fund your projects and your careers like that, right? So whereas I'm doing everything out of pocket, like I got to go get a job and then get my paycheck, pay the government taxes, feed my family, and then take what's left to make a song. Because I do that, I have to work at that level, right? I could easily be out here marketing or whatever, looking at my family, my friends, you guys as followers and subscribers, looking for executive angel investors or things like that, executive producers and angel investors, in the sense of, and I can lay it out in a, logical way. If I wanted to make a project tomorrow and I play like instruments and make beats or whatever, right? And I need, let's say, beats, like literal instrumentals. Like I want to do the work, but the thing that's bottlenecking the project is we can't get beats, right? Well, I could employ, or at least encourage somebody to find me beats or give me resources or a network to a producer. I can also make it to where they can choose the beats for me, and then I pay them the fee for a finder's fee, I guess, and then give them executive producers credits. Or I can find a fan who's just a fan of me that happens to make beats and buy a beat from them, and then give them writer's credits as well as other credits in the music as well. So we're bridging that gap between being a fan and an investor, because now you can have these conversations on like a collaborative, productive level, especially in the United States on a capitalistic system, right? So now when you understand that, you can now look at your favorite artist and say, okay, cool. I want to see if I can get involved in the equity of what you're doing, right? And that's going to change how you probably look at your own lifestyle. Now, instead of just saying, I want to just go to work just to go to work and listen to my favorite song, you can actually invest into your favorite artist and their record label. And I don't know how that would look for you as an individual, but that is just one of the many ways that you can get involved. And understanding what he's going through is going to help you bridge the gap in that knowledge and that learning curve for having these conversations with people.
Also, might commonly hear words like songwriting thrown around. So like I said, this right here is foundational. Sound recordings and masters are on one side, and publishing, composition, songwriting are on a different side. So let's first start by talking about who plays ball in those two buckets. Then I'll give you an understanding, an example of how those buckets work together. So over here on the composition side, people that play ball over here are songwriters. Get into songwriters a little bit more. We also have publishers that play ball on this side. Kind of tied with songwriters and publishers, we have PROs, such as ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. We'll get into all that, but those are some of the people kind of associated with that composition, publishing, songwriting bucket over on this side. Over on the sound recording side, the people commonly associated with that bucket are artists, both independent and signed to record labels. So that gets us to record labels. If an artist is signed to a record label, they play ball in that bucket. Producers also play ball on this side of thing. It's all going to make sense here in a minute exactly how some of that works, but producers deal over here on this left side. And also on a smaller scale, but very much so, also studio musicians play ball over here on the left side with master sound recording. So what really is the difference of a composition, publishing versus a master and sound recording, and how do those worlds kind of play together? Well, I'm going to give you a really good example. So let's say I 100% by myself write a song called Mary Had a Little Lamb. I forever own the composition side, the publishing and the songwriting, and we'll get into the nuance of it, but I forever am associated with and have the rights to that composition side over here for Mary Had a Little Lamb. It doesn't matter who goes and records Mary Had a Little Lamb. I forever have that right side. You with?
Okay, so that's important. We gotta break here because he's about to move to the next part. But the point here is that this is the part that TikTok really, really shook up, and that's the part that I cringe at every time. Basically, what he's saying is you can write, create, and manufacture a new song, but somebody and anybody can come and record that song, but you still own the credit for making it. Okay. So when we talk about sound recordings, that's going to be, let's say, like the actual audio of you performing the song that was written. When we talk about the composition, we're talking about what makes up the song, which would be how the notes are arranged, the key signature, the tonality, the instrumentation, and stuff like that. That's what makes up the song. You own the basic recipe of the song, while somebody is taking your recipe and serving it as a meal elsewhere, right? That's how it works.
With me, you tracking? Does that make sense? All right, so let's then go say I myself go record my own version of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Well, because I went and recorded that version of Mary Had a Little Lamb, that song that I hypothetically wrote 100% by myself, I now own the rights to the sound recording of Mary Had a Little Lamb. So does that kind of make sense how those are two different things that play together? We have the composition, and then we have the sound recording. Now, let's say that you are a superstar artist out there and you love my composition, my hit song, Mary Had a Little Lamb, so much that you also want to go record your own version of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Well, in that case, you would have your sound recording of Mary Had a Little Lamb, but I would still have the composition and publishing associated with that composition. And then I, with my version of Mary Had a Little Lamb, would have my sound recording of that. But still, in both of those sound recordings, I would still retain the composition and the publishing rights. So,
okay. So do you see how that's super valuable if you have like a hit song and people want to do like covers of it and people want to do, little dance videos to it or stuff like, or put it in movies, really, that's the big one, right? Well, here's the thing. What TikTok started to do and what you internet kids started to do is you guys started to do this. You started to say, hey, there's a really dope hip hop song. Let me do a little version of it on TikTok. The thing that y'all started to do is you started to claim ownership of what you just created, right? So you claim ownership of it in the sense of, yes, you created a new sound, right? But you did not create anything. Like you made a new version of something that someone else written. And so now you're struggling with an issue of you have people who have developed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of subscribers by using the compositions of other people to make new sound recordings, which is building the foundation of a brand on nothing. And so what they started to realize is that as record labels, if we keep putting out music, it's way more beneficial for you guys to use it in the ecosystem of sound recordings than compositions, right? So that means if we want to put a new artist out, there's really no point because you guys aren't going to look for the new artist's music. You guys are looking for legacy acts to make new recordings of the legacy act compositions. And that's what they realized. So they started pulling all their music off of TikTok because it's just a waste of time and they're not making money. TikTok is. And they're trying to figure out, well, how do we make this make sense, right? So the way they're going to make it make sense is that the ability, the process to create sound recordings are going to be licensed out now. So now for the ability for you to come pull my song off of TikTok or get 50 Cent or something like that and grab it and turn it into a new TikTok has to be licensed out now. Otherwise, you could just do it with whatever's on the platform already. So if you just take someone's video of them talking and you want to do that, they probably have royalty-free music that they're probably paying artists to make right now for the websites and stuff like that. But the point is that the process for you to do that is now going to be licensed out. So you'll probably have TikTok, right? And then you have TikTok Plus, which gives you access to Suno, which lets you make audio changes to licensed big hit songs, right? I'm just thinking on the fly right now, right? So you'll be paying like an extra $2.99 to get TikTok Lite. And then now as a quote unquote creator program, you can now use licensed music to market whatever you want to market. The issue you guys are going to have is you have nothing to market. These aren't your compositions. You're more than likely, unless you're a salesman just using the music to promote like your business, restaurant, or service, you really are just a person using someone's compositions to make sound recordings for the sake of TikTok to sell ad revenue. So again, as I pointed out earlier, now that I brought that clarity, it's going to change the way you look at content creators. It's going to change the way you look at people who spend a lot of time on live streams just talking and hanging out with their friends now. You're starting to realize that what they're doing is just being employees for the platforms that they're on, and they're not actually leveraging what they're doing on the platforms to actually build a brand or a business. So for example, if you're a live streamer and you want to go live, it really benefits you to understand what you're going to get out of the live stream. If you're going to do the live stream, meaning commit time of your life to the live stream, and all you get is to hang out with your friends, then that's what you got. If you didn't know that and you thought you were building some brand, or if you thought you were going to make content, or you thought you were going to build some kind of like income stream or something like that, then that's not the case, because you didn't design the stream to do that, right? And in order for you to design the stream to do that, you have to change how you look at live streaming. And so musicians realized this when they started looking at music. They stopped making music for live performances because you guys stopped dancing in the clubs. They stopped making music for just for car rides and, you know, road trips and stuff like that, because you guys have playlists on your phones now. There's really no need for that anymore. So now that I've said this again, and you have clarity, it's going to change how you look at artists. It's also going to change how you look at your content. And now you have to change everything, or refuse to care. Because if you don't care and you just want to do this, then you're just here to just have fun and you don't really give a fuck. But if you actually plan on having some kind of success in your family and some kind of success in your business and investing in yourself, this is why I pointed out from the angle of fans, investors, and artists, because this is a conversation that everybody can benefit from. If you have a family and you got bills to pay and you want to be on social media, this should change how you look at social media. If you have a person in your family, or you know, you're working really hard or you're investing in a business or something like that, this should change how you look at social media and how you look at content. But for most of you, you won't. You're going to hear what I'm saying and you're just going to do the exact same thing, right? And so because of that, this is why record labels are targeting partnerships with the tech companies, because they have seen the data. They've seen how you guys will not take information, will not look for clarity, and will not be intentional about what you're doing. And so for years, you guys will find yourself on these platforms. You will find yourself constantly putting out content and you don't get anything from it because you don't have the understanding, right? So now that we understood the difference between compositions and sound recordings, if you were to post a TikTok today and you're a musician, or if you're a content creator and you just want to talk and give your opinion, do you see how important it is to understand what it is you're posting online now, right? So some people, they'll think like, oh, I can just do whatever I want. I can just, you know, I'll be fine. There's nothing of it. Yeah, that's true. But you are considered one of the three things: a consumer, investor, or a producer. And you honestly have to understand that and respect it in order for you to find some kind of happiness in it. What I'm seeing is there's a lot of content creators that think they're producers. And there's a lot of fans that think they're investors, and they are not. And then when you explain it and give them clarity, that's when they get met with resentment, resistance, and being offended and stuff like that, because it takes for them to now change how they're thinking. It's very hard for people to just be open and malleable to things that they wholeheartedly believe about themselves. So don't fear that if you hear what I'm saying right now, you feel some kind of offense. That's fine. That's natural. But you do need to realize that very next time you log in online, what is it you expect to get, and why are you spending so much time doing it?
Does that start to make sense how those are two different buckets? And like I said, understanding these two buckets, as you're going to see as we go down the examples here, everything is divided into those two little buckets. So we got our compositions over here, and we got our sound recordings over here. So moving right along here, let's dive in for a little bit on this right side, the composition and publishing side.
He sounds like he's from the Carolinas.
All right. So on this right side alone, we're not talking about this side over here. We're not talking about master sound recordings. Just on this left side, there are two sides over on the right under compositions that both equal 100% when a song is born. And of those two sides, again, just over here, we have a songwriter share that equals a full 100%. And we have a publisher share that equals its full 100%. But again, these two 100% sides are just under this bucket over here. We're not talking about that sound recording bucket. Does that make sense? You with me? So if you're a songwriter that writes a song fully by yourself and you are not signed to a music publishing deal, you by default, when you go write that hit song called Mary Had a Little Lamb, by default, you get a full 100% of both sides. Okay? So you get 100% of this, and you get 100% of that right there. Okay, let's say you then go write another song with your buddy. You 50-50 co-write it, and neither one of you are signed to music publishers or have music publishing deals. By default, you get 50%, and you still get your 50% of your publishing side. Does that make sense? And your friend gets their 50%, and they get their 50% of their publishing side.
Okay, and I've done this before. I actually have, I think like 1 or 2 tracks where I've done this, but this is one of the easiest ways for you guys as musicians to collaborate and actually, nurture relationships. The problem, like I said, is you guys don't upfront look for clarity for this. Like I've had the hardest part of this conversation that I had with people was trying to get them to actually get affiliated with a PRO. So that's one thing. And that was because we were just young musicians, right? But eventually, after a certain point, most people are affiliated with a PRO. And this is easy. This is like filling out a form, But to bridge the gap between being a fan and an investor, this is another way you could do it. If you are a fan and you feel like you have some kind of musical talent or skill set and things like that, you could get hands in the songwriting credits and get some publishing credits as long as you have some kind of publisher, right? I have a publisher and it's DameSmiff Productions, but the idea behind most of you is that you don't want to do any of this stuff and it's not really, making sense. So what you'll see is people who kind of function like DJ Khaled, where they're more of an executive producer. Like they're not really playing the instrument and doing the rapping, but it's like they facilitate the branding and the networking that goes along with making an album. It's very valuable to know those skills, but it's even more valuable if you have those skills as an artist. So for you guys who are fans, if you want to learn music theory, you want to learn songwriting, that can be valuable to you. You can find yourself writing for, Beyonce or something one day and getting credits. The issue is that it still comes with you entering into the music industry. You're not going to take your corporate desk job sensibilities and make it successful here. So just keep that in mind.
So over here on this big right side, under the composition umbrella, we have these two sides, songwriter, publishing. And I see people out there in the business get these things mixed up. They'll be like, hey, my master and my publishing, and they'll kind of then start talking about things like record labels and artists and studio musicians, and the musicians get publishing, or I'm a songwriter and I get master artist. We're demystifying all that. We have these two nice little buckets that under the two separate buckets, we're starting to build these things out. So when you hear things out there like songwriters and publishing, or a songwriter share, or a publishing share, and does a publisher collect on the master? No. Line, this big thick line down the middle right here is putting a nice thick wall up, and the songwriters and publishers, those two sides all fall under this one umbrella over here on the right side. So in these couple examples we gave right here, we talked about you writing a song 100% by yourself where you own and control your own publishing, or you co-writing a song with your friend 50-50 where you each own and control your own publishing. So let's for a moment talk briefly about music publishing deals. So again, music publishing deals are dealing just over here on this right side of the equation. And music publishing deals we could sit down and talk about for an hour, so we're not going to go way in the weeds on it, but what is a music publishing deal? Okay, so because we have the two halves right here, you as a songwriter, whether you're independent or are signed to a music publishing deal, will always, no matter what, unless you sign some absolutely shady agreement that doesn't really exist, but that's an aside, but you will always, no matter what, in a standard publishing deal, you will always own, and we'll say control, but there's some nuance to it, but you'll always own and control this. Let's say, though, that a publisher approaches you. Publishers come in all various shapes and sizes. There's the major labels, major publishers out there associated with the major labels, I should say, like Warner, Sony, Capitol, Cobalt, things like that. There's major publishers, there's independent publishers, a whole bunch of those around here in Nashville that are small companies, teams of 3 or 4, but they're really connected and in the industry. Any company like that, it could just be one person. Your buddy, if they wanted to, could go start their own publishing company and say, hey, I'm going to be your publisher. And they might have never been a publisher before. When you enter into a publishing agreement, what that is saying is you, remember, you're always going to own and control this over here. But a publisher is going to come in exchange for, we'll get into what they exchange for you, and say, hey, we are now going to own and control part of or all of this. Owns and controls this. So, why in the world would anyone sign a publishing deal? Well, there's some pros and cons to this. And like
I was actually going to express myself why somebody would do that. But before he does that, I might as well do that. A publishing deal works really good if you have like a school or a marching band or something like that, right? You would have basically an output of music that is like, you don't really want to worry about publishing, right? So you build a relationship with a publisher, right? Him saying like your friend starting a company is one thing, but ideally, yeah, you want to work with somebody that knows the business and got like good, history. But you would do this with kind of like separating the business effort and the bandwidth needed for your band. You don't really want to have to worry about publishing rights all the time if you know that you can just get a deal with somebody who's going to manage it. This, like I said, usually happens when you have a massive catalog.
I said, I've moved to Nashville, not in a publishing deal. I was signed to a music publisher for 3 years, chose not to renew that deal, and actually go back to being a professional songwriter fully on my own, independent. So I've seen the good and bad of both of this. So why somebody might sign to a music publisher is an advance, meaning I'm a music publisher and these deals and amounts of money, advances can be structured a lot of different ways, but say, hey, I'm a music publisher. I think you're pretty good. I want to pay you $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year or $1 million a year if you're like, big time songwriter. I'm going to pay you $1 million a year to write songs. And in exchange for that $1 million, let's say I'm going to own and control 100% of your publishing over here. You get your writer share, but I'm going to own control that. What an advance means, and specifically a recoupable advance, this shows up on both sides of the equation, and this is very foundational to understand the music business. An advance basically means if I give you $1 million, the first $1 million you make back, I get all of it. And then $1,000,001, we start splitting according to whatever our negotiated agreement is. So a publisher might say, hey, I'm going to give you an advance in exchange for some of your publishing. So, you think about the new to town songwriter who doesn't make a dollar for music, and somebody expresses interest in them and says, I'm actually going to pay you money to do this thing. Well, it's not like you're getting a salary. Like if you don't recoup that money, it's not like a loan where you're on the line and you have to go write the publisher a check back. I guess that is a pro to it. But $1 million, $100, $1,000, any amount of money that is an advance or a recoupable advance. When you hear those words or those words together, advance, recoupable advance, it's not a free lunch. It's not a salary that you get.
And that's why I say it causes offense when you start to tell artists this, because they now have to rethink everything. Like you can no longer just go in the studio and just record. Like now you are looking at a business, and the way you live your life has to change for the better. And it offends people because you're no longer comfortable doing what you're used to doing. You can no longer just create just to create now. You're creating with the goal and intention to win.
Is an advance, we are advancing you money against your future earnings. And, if it's $30,000, that first $30,000 that comes in the door from the songs that you've generated in this publishing deal, we get that $30,001, we begin to split.
And it doesn't matter how hard you work to get that $30,000. The numbers are the numbers. And that's the part where the last gentleman was talking about the moral side of things. You wouldn't really want to give people an advance that they couldn't pay or couldn't make, or where it didn't benefit them, which is where you get the predatory sense of things.
Reason why somebody might enter into a publishing agreement is for relationships. A lot of these publishers, if it's a publisher worth their salt, they are connected with people over here on this side of the equation. Artists, record labels, producers, studio musicians, the people that then go record those songs and put them out in the world. You kind of starting to see how those two sides of the equation play together here. But yeah, a publisher, the good publishers are very connected. They're in tune with opportunities and artists. They know other publishers who have great songwriters. So a publishing relationship, a publishing deal that goes well, there is that give and take. If you're giving up some ownership, some control of your publisher share over here in exchange for, hopefully some relationships or some money. Another reason why you might sign a publishing deal is for, it kind of goes with the relationship thing, but pitching your songs to, artists and labels over on that left-hand side, or pitching for TV and film licensing.
Now remember, this is not for you to get the song on a record. So that's why he's saying pitching right now. You would be, in this instance, getting a publishing deal, kind of like an author. So that way the publisher can put your song in front of an artist or their record label, like let's say a Beyonce or a Taylor Swift or something like that. And this happens a lot that most people don't really think about as fans. But when your favorite artist is coming out with a new album, they shop around for music. Like I was saying, you guys could help me find beats by just picking beats and then, finding them for me. I can get you a finder's fee and stuff like that. That happens through publishers where they're finding either songs, backdrops, or instrumentals rather, and vocals and melodies and lyrics and things like that. These publishers have access to all that information for people to make sound recordings. And the people who make sound recordings are usually the record labels. And record labels may have like a Christmas album coming up and they need to go to the publishers to get sheet music. The orchestra may need, music for Easter coming up and they need to find a publisher that's selling Easter sheet music or something like that. A band may need a Christmas cover coming up and they want to find a song and they need the sheet music for it. So that's how it would work. So as a songwriter, you having all this music available for publishers, that's where your value lies. Your value lies in having product for publishers to sell, or if you have your own publishing company, having product to publish for songwriters to use in recordings. Again, you're not the one on stage. It's not as glamorous, but you're also leveraging something that you are putting effort in. So there's songwriters who make like commercial jingles and stuff like that. They don't necessarily care about the sentimental of a song. But then if you guys are in high school writing about your boyfriend breaking up with you, you're probably going to have a hard time when you publish the song to somebody who's going to record a sound with it that doesn't align with your beliefs or doesn't align with your principles. So that's why we say, generally, you want to control the songwriting, the publishing, and the sound recording, because you guys are making music in such a way that you're so tied to it. That's why I said there's artists out there who are willing to sell their entire catalogs because they just want to flip it. And they're probably frustrated somebody like Prince, who's putting in their full body, yes, artistic integrity in what they're doing.
And another reason why people might sign a publishing deal is for administration. A pretty standard publishing deal is going to include the administration of both of those sides. So even though you will always own and control this right here, your songwriter share, typically in a publishing deal, and we'll get into co-publishing agreements here in a minute, but typically in a publishing deal, your music publisher is going to go collect all of this right here. $100 come in, they're going to go collect it out, then they'll go divvy it out to you accordingly, typically quarterly or twice a year, or the most standard time frames you see those things come in.
And this is pretty much the coolest breakdown you're going to get of something like this. Make sure you guys go check out the full video if you want to get the full breakdown from him. But this is kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to bringing clarity to your career and your understanding. Like, we have to go and dig this information up, right? It's free, it's easy, it's accessible. He's sitting there breaking it down for us easily. But if we're not going to ask the questions to get clarity, then it really wouldn't offend us if somebody is being vague with their answers. So if somebody says, hey, where are you going? And your answer is, oh, I'm just going out. The authority there is not being respected. And it's only just for the sake of understanding that the question is for clarity, not curiosity, clarity. And so that's it for me today, guys. This was a cool double-edged sword look at the music business. And like I said, if you guys want to see the full breakdown of publishing versus songwriting, sound recordings versus compositions, I can either make a standalone video myself, or you can go check out the video from Christian Hale and things like that. But like I said, this was Musician Talks with DameSmiff. I will see you guys the next time. Next week, we have a whole new theme coming on. Make sure you check out the new digs and stuff like that. I might get like a stripper pole, get some hoes in here or something. We might make it lit. But I will see you guys next week. I'm out. Peace.